Welcome to Detailed, an original podcast by ARCA. This is the show where we uncover lessons learned to help you navigate your next project. I'm Cherise Lakeside, Senior Spec Writer at RDH Building Science, and your host. My guest today is Scott Specht, founding partner of Specht Architects with offices in Austin, Texas, and New York City. Scott graduated from the Yale School of Architecture and founded Specht Architects in 1995 after working at Kohn Pedersen Fox, Studio Daniel Libeskind, and Deborah Burke Architects. Scott is also co-author of the book Coffee Lids and has given a TEDx talk on the future of American housing. Specht Architects has won numerous awards for their work and has been published worldwide, including features in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Architectural Digest, and many others. The project we're going to talk about today is the New American House, where the prototype is currently under construction in Austin, Texas. The New American House is windowless to the exterior with rooms that face a series of interior private courtyards. It's based on ancient Roman house models, but incorporates provisions for the increased personal privacy and comfort that we expect in a house today. Now, let's get into the details. My guest today is Scott Specht, founding partner of Specht Architects with offices in Austin, Texas, and New York City. Scott, welcome to Detailed. How you doing over there in Austin?
Great. Well, thank you for having me on. Really appreciate the chance. And Austin is excruciatingly hot, as you expect, but today is only 103, so it's a calmer day than normal.
103. Yeah. Anything over about 95 and I start getting more than a little cranky. It's like, it's too, and I don't have AC at home. So, I have one unit in my office, but outside of that, it's sweltering.
I could not imagine living without air conditioning, quite honestly. I grew up in Florida, so air conditioning has been a big part of my life.
In Oregon, where, although this is changing now, we're getting some pretty hot weather in the summer as well. But in Oregon, when it rains 9 months out of the year, not a lot of people invest in AC in their homes. And then we all cry like toddlers when we get our few weeks of really hot weather. A couple of years ago, we got like 100 and what was it? It was like 100 and did we get up to like 100? Not 116, 106 or 112. I was out of town visiting my kid in Boston. And I came home in the middle of that, and I literally said some very choice words when I opened the front door of my house, and this wall of heat just assaulted me. My walls were literally warm inside my house. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen, because we don't see that here much.
Well, the thing I never understand in Austin, I never understand in Austin when I'm driving and it's 112 outside and there are people jogging. My body type is not that. I would not be able to survive that, I think.
There's some brain cells. Well, I think there's brain cells missing for anybody who runs, period. I don't run unless somebody's chasing me. So let's start talking about this. I like to start with an icebreaker question just to get to know you a little bit, warm us up a little bit. And I pick a different one every time, and I'm getting a little crazier every time with some of the questions I choose. So your question today is, which is the polar opposite of the last time I did this question. What is the worst career advice you have ever been given?
The worst career advice? Probably something like follow your dreams, because my dreams are just weird and confusing. It would be terrible career advice to follow those. But no, actually... I don't remember receiving much career advice at all. I didn't have a mentor per se, and worked for a number of companies, and nobody really just sits you down and talks to you about your career and where you're going. I guess the only thing I can think of is I actually had an employer where I was working, had decided to go out on my own and start my own firm. And they said, you need to be less ambitious. And I thought that was I didn't think it was necessarily bad career advice for everybody, but it was really odd. And it just struck me as strange. A strange thing to say to somebody who's leaving is, be less ambitious, please. Maybe they were worried about future competition. I have no idea, but it was an odd talk.
See, it would be a whole nother episode or 12, but I'm a very active mentor and teacher. And so you saying you didn't really get any mentorship, pet peeve of mine in this industry, and be less ambitious. Are you kidding me? That's okay. Well, so that's a pretty good one.
Yeah. It was kind of like you need to pay your dues or at least learn, and I agree with this. You need to learn detailing. They don't teach you this in school, and you need to learn how to actually detail a building when you're, in your first jobs. But I had actually been working for quite a while, and it wasn't a concern of mine. So it was a strange one. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that our industry has changed a lot in that arena, but I think there is still some maybe out of date mindsets running around out there still saying things like that. But
I would agree.
We have a lot of young people coming behind us, so that's going to change fast. So let's talk about this house, because I am totally and completely fascinated with this house. Huge conversation with a friend this morning about this house. So the new American house, crazy unique. I personally have never seen anything quite like this. And I've been around maybe a week or two. Let's start with the story, the history behind what led you to design this house for yourself, and really what inspired this journey.
Okay. Well, I came of age architecturally in the early 1990s, and there were a pair of recessions in the early 1990s, and not a lot was getting built. And so most architects around that time were always doing experimental projects, just ideas they had after work. You would do them. I remember during that time, Rem Koolhaas was a big hero of everybody, and he had written, Delirious New York in the 1970s. But, the idea that you could create a manifesto for yourself and put your own projects in it, even if they hadn't been built, was big and flying around. So my career from the start, I've always done a combination of experimental projects along with the real projects, and continued that to this day. I keep it going back and forth. And I've given a couple lectures on it, actually, where I show an experimental project and then how that led to something in the built work. So, and our office does a lot of these kind of things. Usually it's a commentary project on something social, environmental. The best known one is the Zero House, which kind of went viral 5 or 6 years ago. It was a drop-in place house that runs itself and requires no foundation and all this stuff. You can look that up. It never got to the point of actually building one because it's very expensive to build. We priced it. But anyway, that one got a lot of attention. We did do some nonsense ones. We did a prosciutto room, and that came from the trend of people doing wine cellars and cheese cavs in their house. And it was like, what's the next one is a prosciutto room. And it was a room that had a giant tree stump in the middle and a prosciutto hanging from a chain from the ceiling and a knife stuck in it. So that was kind of a funny one. But the new American house started in the same way. It was just a project that I doodle around with on the weekends. And it came from this sense of social instability that was been going on around the world, a sense of unease, and started looking at more ancient examples of houses, like the Roman house, for example. It has no exterior windows. The typical Roman house has a front door facing the street that usually has a big, heavy wooden barricade that you'd put on at night, and you'd enter, and there's a giant courtyard in the middle, the peristyle, and all the rooms were centered around that. So you still got a feeling of outdoors and light and air, everything else, even though you had no views to the exterior. Yeah, as I said, it was a project. We did a bunch of renderings of it, and it had a lot of features to it to make it completely self-sufficient. It had a rooftop herb garden. It had a drone pad because that's when Amazon was talking about delivering things by drone. So you could basically, and solar panels, the whole deal. So you could basically live there and never have to leave this little compound of your own. It's different than our other projects because it's got a little bit of a more than a little bit, I guess, a pessimistic twist to it, as opposed to the optimism of some of our other stuff. But at the same time, I was thinking about, building my own house. I'd been in Austin for long enough, and I go back and forth between Austin and New York, but I'm in Austin more of the time. And the more I looked at it, it started to make more and more sense from a number of other points of view rather than this general concept. I live right now in a 1959 single family house that's not in a suburb. It's on a kind of fringe urban part of the city. The whole suburb was built in the late 50s. And the zoning there is, 5-foot side setbacks. So you're 10 feet away from the house next to you. You have a 20-foot front setback. So you're right on the street, more or less. And the blinds on the sides of the house are always down. You never raise the side blinds. The front looking out, you raise once in a while. You don't want really people looking in all that much. Occasionally when you want to get some extra light. So you really have a view towards the backyard. And the backyard's completely fenced in. And so it's like, why do we have all these houses with the windows on all around them? And, looking back, it comes from the idea, the first suburban houses were based on Cape Cod houses, but the idea of the ranch house model, these are houses that were meant for giant fields that you look out upon or, natural views, but we just transplanted them into suburbs that make absolutely no sense. So, the Roman house started to look a lot better. And even with modern houses, people tend to not think this way. You see a lot of modern houses in Austin that have glass all around on all four sides on the ground floor. The houses go up, and about 2 months later, you start to see them building a wood fence around the whole thing because people are looking in from the street. So I decided to take it more seriously, and that's where it came from. I started to really think about it as a project for myself. And at the time, I wasn't married yet, and now married. And so my wife loves the concept as well. So we're moving ahead.
I have to. So I'm a lover of light, and I know there's light, but I was trying to picture myself this morning thinking about this interview, sitting in this house and not being able to see what's happening out there. I'm surrounded right now by windows. And not being able to see if my package got delivered or a neighbor's doing something crazy or whatever. Not that I really care about that, but it's entertaining on occasion. And so it seems like that would be I know that you're not living in it quite yet. So it seems like that would be an adjustment to, you would really be disconnected from your outside, the perimeter outside your house. I can see the appeal to that as well, though.
Yeah, there are pros and cons. If you really, the things you mentioned of seeing someone dropping a package at the front, the house does have a package drop door in it. So that's less of a concern to see if there's a package outside, and it'll have a Ring doorbell. So you can see it with a camera if you really wanted to see something outside. But part of that has to do with the sites. And I know, I'll talk a little bit more detail about that later. But this site in particular is, just to picture how you approach the house, it's in a neighborhood similar to what I live in now, which is kind of a fringe urban single-family neighborhood. In Austin, there's, like many big cities, there's ADU zoning. So if you have a lot that's over a certain size, you're allowed to build, an accessory dwelling unit in the back. And in Austin, you're allowed to sell that lot off as part of a condo regime. And you can build, but it only opens up to an alley in the back, and it's a gravel. It's really an alley, and so I was looking at properties in Austin, and things are insane in Austin for property prices. But I did find an alley flat lot like this that was fairly inexpensive. Well, you drive down that alley, and there is nothing to look at. There are the sides of other buildings. There are some weeds. There's an old rusty piece of a fence. There's nothing to look at outside. I'd rather create the environment that I'm looking at, the surfaces that I'm looking at outside. So when designing this house, it has 2 courtyards. One of them is a fairly large courtyard. It's about 20 feet by 15 feet. If relatively large for something like this. And then there's another one on the opposite side that's a very long, narrow one that's only 5 feet wide, but runs the length of the house. They both frame the living room. So I was out at the construction site yesterday and I was looking at it, and I started to think, is there too much view from this thing? It's almost too bright in the living room because it's got light coming in from both sides. And it's kind of the opposite of what you'd imagine of a windowless house. It's probably the brightest house we've ever done in the office, and it feels almost like it's floating between these two gardens, which is amazing. So I think I'm very happy with it. I need a lot of dark to sleep, so there's going to be blackout shades on the windows from the bedroom. But other than that, I think it may feel different. I don't know. We'll see. I'm willing to put myself out as the guinea pig as to whether I feel something uneasy about living in this house or not. But it's what architects should be doing, not playing it safe. Should go out there a bit and do something that maybe other people can't do. Yeah.
So I love that you call this a windowless stealth house. It's stealth. With words, paint a picture. You talked about the courtyards a little bit, but paint a picture of the house in its entirety, the spaces in it, what it looks like from the outside verbally. We'll have pictures on the site, but just describe what's all included in this house.
Yeah, I think the vibe we're looking for is kind of North Korean prison cell. That's kind of the vibe. No, it is an unusual one. There's a big disjunction between exterior and interior. So from the outside, and part of that had to do with budget. The renderings you're going to be, putting up, where the prototype the original was concrete block. The exterior was just concrete block with one big split door. It had a front entry door and a garage door, and that's it. And they were both steel. For this one, I started to, look at other materials that could be as durable and maintenance free. So you drive down this alley. It's about halfway down the alley, and what you see is a big rectangle of horizontally oriented corrugated metal. That's it. And unfinished. It's just screwed up. We did some interesting details at the corners. And then in the center of that is an aperture framed in steel. And set into that aperture is a front door that's black, a panel, and then a garage door that's black. And that panel is intended... I've always wanted to use this shrink wrap material that they use on buses, for advertising and things like that. So this panel in between the two doors is intended to be a graphic that I will design and shrink wrap onto the house. So it can be pulled off and changed, as you see fit to change the character of the house or whatever. I even thought of selling it as ad space and putting, some lawyer's ad on this. Unfortunately, there aren't many people driving down this alley, so I don't think it would bring a large amount of income. But anyway, so that's the exterior. It really is this one graphic, but black and corrugated steel. That's it. But as you walk in, the concept here is, if it's scaled up especially, is you create a jewel box. You don't spend your money on the exterior of the house. You put it all onto the living spaces in the interior. So that, the money I did have, and it's not a high budget house by any means, I put it into the interior. And so you walk in, it's wood floors for the most part. The glass goes floor to ceiling. And there's custom made wood cabinetry in the kitchen, and a lot of handmade tile, green in color. So your feeling when you walk in is wood, green, handmade tile, and all the plant life that's going on in the courtyard. So hopefully it's going to feel like a very, oasis-like, restful, calming feel to the place. And that's what we're going for. We're spending a little bit more on lighting. We're using some lighting that can be adjusted, color, temperature-wise and brightness-wise, very, very critically. It's Ketra brand, and so the tuning of that interior experience is the big part of it, and the contrast of that between the exterior and interior.
So you haven't mentioned I'm assuming there's things in this house like a kitchen and bedrooms and
There are,
bathrooms.
yes. Yes, the house is the ADU laws in Austin. The zoning laws allow you only to build 1,100 square feet maximum. So we pegged that at 1,100 square feet exactly, and then you're allowed to have a 200 square foot garage on top of that. So we maximize that as well. Um, for somebody, it's just my wife and I. The original design for our house had one bedroom. It was a single master bedroom, and it had a kitchen and a living space and a powder room, and that was pretty much it. My son, who's 21, took a look at the plans and got very upset. He's like, well, "Where do I stay when I come over?" And valid question, but my feeling was always that, like, there's literally a hotel 2 blocks down. Wouldn't it be better if when you come visit, I get you a hotel room and you could just stay there and walk over? But that didn't play very well. And maybe it's my own mental, feelings about houses and how you inhabit them and everything. But we ended up adding another bedroom into that bedroom for him and suite, and it'll be used as an office in the other time. So it's a 2-bedroom, 2-bath house. With this big living kitchen space, dining. There's no dining room per se. It does have a counter with, the kitchen counter is an island with stools, but I built in a restaurant style booth. I've always loved sitting at restaurant booths. So it's got that built into the kitchen, as part of it as the main dining space as well.
Sounds fantastic. Fantastic. I have 2 grown sons as well, and that is exactly the kind of thing they would say to me. I bought my townhome 2 years ago, and it's got 2 primary bedrooms and 2 full baths. And do you think I ever go in the other one?
Yeah.
No, but if I did not have a space for them to land when they came, I would never hear the end of it. It's like, you're really trying to unload us, Mom. It
is an interesting
sounds
thing
like a
because
very zen.
Oh, it is.
Sorry,
It's an interesting thing about bedrooms and unused spaces. It's that's something I've always tried to figure out is, like, we have a lot of clients who want, their kids who are grown kids to have a separate bedroom for each of them when they come back to visit. And those rooms just sit empty for 99.9% of the time. So how can you make that a more efficient situation, but still not upset people or make it feel not like a family house? And it's a trick that I haven't really solved yet. The most interesting one, I think, was a house we did that had a lot of zoning regulations in terms of size as well. And all they could fit was kind of a tiny bunk room. It was they were 7 feet by 10 feet each, and had a bed pushed to one side. And they let each kid decorate the interior how they wanted to, but they were like 3 little chambers in a row. And I seem to be really happy with that solution. So maybe something like that we'll see more use. I don't know.
My solution was my townhome is 3 levels. And so first primary bedroom's top level, main floor is kitchen, living room, and bottom level is the other primary bedroom. And both the bottom level and the middle level have decks. So I turned the downstairs. It is a guest bedroom, but it's also where the bar is and a party room, and it has a deck off of it. So it does double as, when the kids aren't here, which they're here rarely, where they actually sleep here, it doubles as extra entertaining space. But that was my solution.
It makes a lot of sense to the double use thing. I mean, the Murphy bed idea is not a bad one, and we've used those as well in some New York apartment renovations we've done. So still thinking through exactly how to fit that, lay that room out.
And I'm actually considering exactly that, because there's a little pop out area that there is a bed down there that the bed is kind of tucked into, that would make it very easy to put in a Murphy bed and just to fold that puppy out when I needed it. You talked a little bit about materials already. Is there anything else that you didn't already mention that is unique or different in the materials that you used on this space, or a material you used in a unique way, an average thing?
Yeah, I think part of my budgetary concerns and durability concerns were I did everything as standard as you could ever imagine. A few things are different about it. We used we ordered big insulated glass units without frames, so we didn't buy a window system, which is partially due to the production lead time issues going on now, but also it's a big cost driver of a lot of our houses. So we came up with a custom IGU installation system that reduced the cost a lot. And so that, and maybe the corner trim on the corrugated metal. Corrugated metals comes in and out of style, kind of as an exterior material, but it's great. It's super durable, especially if you get the heavier gauge stuff. And what we're trying on this one is at the corners. We're trying to miter cut it and actually miter the corners so it looks like it turns the corner. You'll get a little gap there, but at the scale of the house, you won't notice it too much. So hopefully it'll be even though it's a common material, it'll be a very interestingly detailed box.
I loved the corrugated metal concept on the outside. I think that's, kind of edgy and a little bit of a contrast to what you're doing on the inside, where it's more of a Zen space on the inside, but it's a little more, edgy and stark on the outside.
I'm always fascinated.
I bet it's a surprise materials. Walking in.
No, that's hopefully the idea is when you walk in, there's a big wow moment because you're looking as you walk in and you have the kitchen to the right, but there's a giant corner window that encompasses one entire side of the kitchen and then extends down the living room that looks into that main courtyard. So you'll open the door and it'll be like, whoa, moment as you enter the space. The building materials that come in and out of trend and style really always fascinate me. Like the one that's fascinating me right now is the 1930s style glass block that has a little bit of a wavy texture to it. It was invented and used heavily at the, in the 1930s at the big piece of the New York World's Fair in 1939. Then was completely dead and you wouldn't be, seen using it anywhere. And then in the late 70s, early 80s, it's made it come back. And then it was part of this whole Miami Vice thing going on and all that. Then it dies again. And now you're starting to see it trickle in for a third time. It's funny how that happens. Corrugated metal is kind of the same way. I have a feeling.
I'm sure your home is going to be timeless. So we talked about this a little bit before we started recording. A goal for this podcast is for our listeners to learn something from every episode, as well as hear about these cool, unique projects that are going on out there. So let's start with design.
Okay.
Can you tell me about one or two particular challenges you faced during design to get to where you wanted to go and how you solved it?
Sure. Yeah. The biggest one was something that had been in my head from the very, very start. And it was something I worried over a lot, which was zoning and building code, fire department specifically. It's like, the Austin Building Department is tough and they review everything with a fine tooth comb. Fire department's the same way. And I thought, okay, you have a windowless building here. What are they going to say about egress and all of that? So, we worked out a couple of things. Originally, the design was that each of the courtyards had a separate panic door from the courtyard directly to the side yards on the outside, and then you would exit in that way. But it didn't look very good because the courtyards are supposed to be the highlight of the house, and so to have this cut-in door, even if you put a panel over it or something, it just wasn't working. What we ended up doing was putting a exterior panic door in each bedroom directly to the outside. And we detailed the inside of that with a wall treatment system that goes over the top of that opening so you don't even see it. So you kind of know it's there, but it's not visible. And even with that, though, I could imagine this roll of drawings showing up in the building department, or this file showing up at the building department, and them looking at it for the first time and going, we've got 3,000 questions on this, because they always come back with multiple rounds of questions on anything that you do. We submitted it, It came back fully approved. First, no questions. It was a complete shock. It was the last house I would have expected to go through with no questions, but somebody saw what we were doing and was fine with it. And I guess in many ways it's safer. You're not trying to crawl through a window opening that's off the floor and a certain height and everything. It's a proper door that you go out of, and so it's probably safer than most houses in that regard. But I was extremely happy with the building department with regard to this one. That was really the big design issue. There were some other ones, when you do a house like this, the walls that surround the house, even the courtyard walls that are perimeter walls, can't really be treated as fences. Fences have height regulations and limitations. The advantage there is you get more space back because you can put them right on the property line. Here, we lost some space in it because we had to put the fences, more or less, the walls, behind the setback line, so they're a proper part of the house. Luckily, the setbacks are, as I said, minimal in this area, 5 feet on each side, and you need some room for miscellaneous equipment and valves and connections and so forth. So it wasn't a big hindrance, but it theoretically could lose you some exterior space by doing that. It was a trade-off that was worth it to me.
I'm curious on those panic doors, and I'm curious because I made some guesses this morning before we talked, and so I'm trying to see if I get a gold star for the day.
Okay.
Can you see them from the outside? Do they blend
you
into?
Yeah, you can see them from the outside. The jambs are recessed slightly, and the contractor is putting on a panel of the corrugated metal. So you will see a reveal around where the doors are on the outside.
Okay.
But they're on the side yard, and the side yards are so close to there's a garage on one side and there's another 80 residents on the other side, that you can't even get a view angle towards them really from the alley. So they're more or less invisible. It's really, I'll know they're there and the builder will know they're there, but not many other people will.
Okay, so I get 3/4 of a gold star.
Yeah.
Because, when I was having this conversation this morning, it was like, there has to be hidden doors that I can't see in these pictures because you have to get out if there's a fire. There has to be hidden doors. And I thought that was a genius way to deal with that, because I was just all morning long, it's like, how are they getting out of the house? I need to know this. Right. So I love that. Are there any things that I had to look, because we already kind of talked about camouflaging the house, unless you have more that you want to talk about. You're camouflaging or decorating this home any way that you like. Is there anything more that you want to tell me about that? I saw it, in your drawings and stuff, kind of an example.
Right.
Think of a million ways you could have fun with that. And I love that you can change it out. What made you consider that?
Yeah, there was an original idea that when exploring the first concepts, that the exterior is completely stealth. And we did a number of renderings where it blends into any kind of environment. And that's kind of the idea of this being, the name Stealth House came up first before New American House. And so we showed it rendered in like low-rise urban settings, like the areas where you see auto body shops and things like that, more industrial areas. We did a couple of renderings where this is just put in, a row with these other low-rise urban areas. You wouldn't even know it's there. So it can blend right in. We did one that showed a big, painted mural on the side, like a street art mural. And then there were some other ones where it's, has in an old town of some kind, you could actually bolt on decorative pieces on the front of it to make it look like it's part of something else. So it could be completely camouflaged in that way. There was also one rendering we did where it had true camouflage on it, camouflage netting over it. So yeah, there were some interesting ideas as to where this could be put. And I always like the idea of, I've always had an interest in these scrap lands. And this came again from when I was looking for this property originally, that if you go on MLS, you find in any city almost, houses and land have a certain standard price. And then you'll see some crazily low priced pieces of land. And immediately in your mind's like, okay, what is with this land? Why is nobody picking this? I was built on. A lot of them in Austin are in floodplains, so they're unbuildable. It's pretty funny. You take those lots and go to the building department, and they say, "Oh, that one again." And it's because they basically rejected anything that's been proposed for any of those lots. So some of them have that problem and they're unbuildable, but some of them are like a piece of land that directly abuts an interstate entry ramp. And those always fascinate. It's like, man, I could pick that up. What could you do with it though? So, the undesirableness of those lands, of those properties, comes from a few things. It's the view is one, and the acoustics is number two. This house can solve both, or I wouldn't say solve, but it can help with both of those problems. Certainly the view is an easy one. And the acoustics, you're going to get some sound transmission over, even if it's a solid concrete wall, you're still going to get some sound infiltration, but certainly a lot less than if it's a traditional house there. So I'm still very interested in these scraplands parcels that, you could end up using them for increased density in any city and give them some value.
So that was what you meant when you said the site doesn't really matter. The only thing you may have to get past is zoning.
Yeah, that's the big thing. And, a lot of these scrap pieces of property are in residentially zoned areas, and people are trying to get rid of them. They flip a lot. There's a couple of streets here in Austin that are right up against the backyard abuts an interstate, and those change hands a lot. Yeah, I think people they think they can put up with the sound a lot more than they can, and you buy them, and then it's time to move out. A year later. So this can help with that, but the site doesn't really matter. It's it could be in one of the main renderings we did of the house is in a desert, and it's a literal oasis at that point. So you collect rainwater, and you have just your tiny little garden in there that you take care of, and the rest you don't worry about. So it can make use of a lot of sites that wouldn't normally be usable.
Well, and we could probably use that in a lot of cities. I don't know how it is in Austin, but housing of any type in Portland is at a premium. We don't have enough housing for the people that live here. So, and I just recently did an interview I think it was a 3 or 4 story office building that they put in this little triangular shape of unused land between some, much bigger buildings that was just sitting there, and it was at an on-ramp to a bridge.
Right.
And they really got creative in using this junk space that's been sitting there for as long as I can remember, not being used. I don't think anything has ever been built on that little spot of land, and now it's good usable space. With
zoning
amenities.
Zoning prevents a lot of this kind of stuff. I mean, it's certain. You have areas of town that are zoned only for, let's say, industrial, and there's no reason, the original intent is great, where you have factories spewing out smells and chemicals, and you just don't want people having to live in that. But in a lot of cases, these are very quiet warehouse districts, things like that. And there's really not a functional reason why people couldn't live in those areas. And in fact, it might bring some life to those areas where at night they're just completely abandoned and deserted. So I'm a big proponent of mixing up uses. It's a different conversation, but cities now have become, as retail in some cases starts to close, they become cities of bars and restaurants, and a lot of other uses. You look at cities 150 years ago, and there were meat markets and all kinds of industrial things going on in the city, and I think it brings some life to that you don't get with just retail or restaurants and all that. I would love to mix it up more.
Agreed. So did you incorporate any particular sustainability factors into this home?
Nothing blatant. I think the biggest sustainability factor is one that a lot of times gets overlooked. It gets overlooked, especially in calculations that are done for, if you have an energy efficiency code, things like that. It doesn't take into account the size of the house. you can build a 20,000 square foot house, and as long as you do X, Y, and Z for insulation value and X, and that's fine. If you build an 1,100 square foot house, you don't get any benefit bonus for building a tiny, tiny house that uses very little energy, even though you may have the same or lower performing windows. So I think that the whole thing is the fact that that we've downsized so much and made it such a small house. Really was the biggest factor in energy efficiency. Of course, we're using all the usual things, closed cell insulation and thermal window units and all that stuff. There wasn't anything extreme in that regard, though. It is pre-wired for full solar, which I plan to do. I need to save up a little more money after building this, and then I can put a solar system in and some backup battery. But yeah, I think downsizing is the biggest thing that can be done for any house.
And that, that's a really good point. I guess I never really thought about it that way before until you just said that. Just having a smaller footprint and less impact is a huge benefit. And you're right. You should get credit for that. You can go tell them I said that.
Okay.
Like they care.
And more than any other, high-tech solutions, more insulation and better insulation has such a gigantic impact on the house, on the performance of the house, as opposed to even solar panels, things like that. It's hard to do in a glass, a house that has a lot of glass in it, because that's your weak point in the whole thing. But, one of the other things we did in the house is, rather than having, a lot of times when you see a house that has large glass areas, they're all operable windows that open up fully. And we didn't do that. We really sat down and thought about where we will go in and out of this house the most. And the rest are fixed glaze units. And that prevents a lot of leakage. So you get a lot more performance in that way as well.
So is there, just from a fresh air standpoint, like right now at this time of year, my sliding glass door is open 24 hours a day, just to let air in the house. And my backyard is a forest.
Right.
So do you have anything to accommodate that, or?
Yeah. I mean, there are openings, sliding doors in certain areas, so you get cross ventilation, but this may be just a factor of living in Austin, Texas. There are very few days of the year when you're going to want to open up the whole, California. If I lived in San Diego, absolutely, I'd want that thing open all the time. But you get 3 or 4 days here a year where you're going to open the whole house up. So
yeah, I guess.
So it's either
the
heat or the AC. One of the two is going to be on.
I've been there once, so I have experienced a little bit of that. So that totally makes sense to me. So
I always get the comment, it's like, oh yeah, it's hot there, but it's a dry heat, right? Nope, it is not a dry heat.
I get all 4 seasons here. I mean, fully all 4 seasons, and I'm really happy with that. Okay, so don't laugh. But over the years, I have had contractors more than once tell me that the worst possible client a contractor can have is an architect who is designing their own house. I know that this home is currently under construction, so I know you're not completely done yet, but tell me, how is it going with construction? Are you and the contractor still friends?
Well, I set things up a little bit differently. Plus, my dad was an electrical subcontractor. So I come from construction people, and I've always had great relationships with contractors. I get where they're coming from, and there are some architects set themselves up as they want to find problems and don't want to solve them and things like that. But it's kind of how you treat each other. And so if everybody's nice and on the same team, things go well. In this case, I set it up quite differently, where the general contractor on the job is actually a person, Austin Specht, in Austin, who's worked for me for many years. He was a great architect and designed worked on a number of homes that I did. And he decided that he just didn't want to sit at a desk and design all day. He was much more into the hands-on part of it. So he started a millworking shop to start with and built beautiful furniture. He built some pieces for my current house. and then decided he wanted to get into full contracting. So I gave him his first this is his first project. So he's working on that as a GC. And so it's nice. I know his, his attention to detail, and I'm getting a good price because it's his first project, and I know he's going to do right. And the subcontractors, a lot of them are in the same kind of category. The mill worker I've known for many, many, many years. Also did not own a millwork shop per se. He was a welder and started working with wood and built furniture and built out his own house, but didn't have a shop that he was selling millwork to people. This is his first project as well, doing a full house millwork. So you can go down the line. The framer, same sort of situation. So it's been kind of like an Amish barn raising more than than a contracting project. It's like a bunch of friends getting together to build this thing. It'll get interesting. Right now, it hasn't reached the point of, people I don't know, like sheetrockers. So we have to bring in outside help there, and we'll see what happens. But I don't foresee too many problems. Like I said, the detailing is fairly simple on this, and it shouldn't be a big problem. And Austin even picks up some of that. Like, he's doing some of the flashing himself on the project because he's kind of a Renaissance man builder. So he can pick up things that others might miss along the way. He's not just a manager.
I love that. And being, the first one for a couple of these guys, and you designing this yourself, I would imagine that there's a lot of extra care and feeding going into this project. Everybody really wants it to come out amazing.
That's what I'm hoping. And yeah. And it's funny. It's sort of like the cobbler's kids don't have shoes for themselves. I'm a bit fanatical about detailing on my projects for my clients, and really worry over the tiniest reveals and how they meet each other and that kind of thing. And I'm much looser here for my own house for some reason. I can't quite figure out the psychology of that, but I'm kind of letting the team, figure out what needs to be done more so than I would normally. I'm sure it'll be great, and if there's a problem, they'll fix it. But for some reason, I'm just less worried about it.
I'm not going to even try to analyze that one. So, still talking about construction, we all know that if something is going to come up in a project that needs to result in a change or a pivot in the plan or anything like that, it's typically going to rear its ugly head during construction. Have you had anything so far in your process come up that maybe differed from what you originally planned that caused you to change some of the things you're doing?
Not yet. And, I've been in this for a long, long time. I started my own firm with my partner, Louise Hartman, in 1995. So I kind of know what's going to be hard to do and what's not. And as I said before, there really isn't anything I've tried to do that's crazy and out there with the house. I guess the biggest surprises have come from the things you hear a lot lately is sort of supply chain issues and all that. Some of them are due to the fact that there's still a lot of work for certain suppliers in Austin. We designed the whole house around using 9-foot IGU units. Because that's where the price break is. If you go to 10 foot, the cost goes up exponentially at that point. So it was all 9-foot and all silicone glazed. And we found that some of the installers we wanted to use just didn't want to deal with it. They had enough work that they didn't need to. And because it's a hassle to use 9-foot units, you have to haul them around. Breakage is more likely. If one breaks a seal, you got to haul it out again and replace it and everything. So they were just like, we don't want to deal with it. So we had to find people who were still willing to work with it. And it was a small project. So it's not anything that's going to be massively enticing to anyone. You try to give them the pitch that, here's an experimental house that's going to get a lot of attention. Well, glazing installers aren't going to care about that. So it's been I think the surprises, and wouldn't even call them surprises, have come along those lines more than anything. I have also tried to push the architect's discount angle as much as I possibly can with suppliers. So a lot of the things I've used in the house have been companies that give me the biggest discounts. And so I think I started that process a little too late, because it's more of a rigmarole to go through to sign up for their discount. You used to just show your card that, hey, I'm an architect, can you give me a big discount? Now you have to sign up for all this stuff. And so a number of things I've had to buy at retail just because I started the process too late. But yeah, I would do that early. And I always, any house we do, I always say, as soon as you've hired the architect, start getting your contractor on board immediately. It's like the old days of sending drawings out, for bid from multiple contractors. First of all, you're not going to get very many contractors who are even willing to participate in that process. But also, it's not the best way to build a house. It sets up a conflict in the team right from the start, is that they've bid low, possibly maybe too low to get the job, and then they're trying to make it up with change orders all along the line. So I think of it as one team, and I try to talk the clients into feeling the same way. Get everybody on board as a team right at the beginning. Then we can be smooth, make the whole thing pleasant and smooth all the way along. And usually the cost isn't any different. I haven't found a big, where people get a huge break for bidding it out to 20 people and seeing who comes in the lowest cost. So, yeah.
I think, I'm hearing more and more of that exact sentiment on projects of any size. Get everybody on early, get everybody on board early, get everybody on the same page, and making some of these decisions together. And I think historically, one of the things that a lot of architectural firms really didn't think too hard about in the process of designing any building is all those things that happen during construction, all those questions that have to be answered because this person just bid the job after the documents were done, lowballed it. We all know they're looking for change orders at that point because they have to make their money too, but they can't get the job if they don't. And in that whole process, and all these years I've been in this business, never heard anybody really talking about, I've been screaming it for years. Get this stuff done early. What it saves you later will pay for it. And so I'm not surprised that you say at the end of the day, it ends up costing about the same, because construction is so much smoother and the prices are so much more accurate when you work that way. I would like to see us doing every project everywhere that way.
Yeah, the truth is, no matter how tight your set of drawings is and how many drawings you issue, if a contractor wants to find an excuse for a change order, they can find one. You can't show every nail position, exactly, or every screw where it has to go, and there's an argument that can be made. It's like, well, those screw positions weren't specified and they didn't show on the drawing. So, I'm going to charge extra for that. And then you get into a big battle. So, yeah, it comes down to the same with fixed cost contract versus cost plus. In the end, they come out the same. It really doesn't make a big difference. So
there's a huge lesson in that. And, there's whole books. I use one in one of the classes I teach as an example. It's called The Contractor's Guide to Change Orders. Mm-hmm. It is literally, I think, 286 pages on how to find a change order in your drawings and specifications. It is the most. No, get a copy.
So you're the problem here, huh? As you're teaching where to get these change orders.
No, I'm teaching all the design professionals that you're not going to escape this. There's guidebooks to help the contractors find this stuff. So here's how you do it right, so they have less stuff to find. That's what my class is about. I'm not teaching them how to find change orders.
Well, I will say that we tend to use contractors we know and trust who don't do that kind of thing over and over again. So from a marketing standpoint, if you pull that, you're not going to get much more business. And architects talk to each other. So the word gets around. Don't use them. They'll hit you with a million change orders.
Yeah, that doesn't work so well on public work, though. I did
That's
my
true.
first 22 years of my career was on public work, mainly schools, where you're required to do the whole low bid environment and you have to take the low bidder. I even went
Right.
through a process on one of our projects where we had to go to crazy lengths to try to exclude the low bidder because they weren't a very great contractor and nobody wanted to work with them because of past experience. That's hard to do on public work.
That
So
makes
getting
sense.
it right is even more important. Low bid environment, and you have to take the low bidder.
Right.
So we learn and we grow from every project we do. I firmly believe that you are never an expert. You are always changing and morphing with the world and in what you've learned the day before. And then we take that wisdom to the next project and do things differently. It doesn't necessarily mean we did it wrong before, but maybe we learned something and we could do it a little more efficiently or a little bit better or a little bit different on that project. What if you were going to turn around and design yourself a second house starting tomorrow that is
Hmm.
similar in nature to this one? What would you do differently on the next one? What did you learn from this process so far?
Well, a couple of things. One is something I just talked about, and I didn't follow my own advice on, which is I didn't bring a landscape architect on early enough. And these courtyards, are the highlight of the house. And I, for whatever reason, put it off until later in the game. And then it becomes more difficult. Now that framing's up, what size root ball
Yeah.
can you get in here without a crane? So that is something I definitely would have started with. Was getting with a landscape designer and working on that immediately. It's coming out fine, and we have somebody great that we work with over and over again who's helping out. But that's something I did. But I think the one thing that is not a lesson yet learned, but maybe, is there's a real pressure for any lot, residential or commercial, to do this highest and best use thing and to minimize the cost of construction so that if you turn around and sell it, you are going to not be in a hole. And when you do a house like this, a single, it's an ADU lot, which is not a desirable lot to start with, although it's in a great location, it's still on an alley. When you do a courtyard house like this, there's a lot of perimeter wall for the amount of interior space. So it ends up costing more just to build that length of perimeter wall to create those courtyards. So I'm spending more on it than if I just built a cube box with some windows put in it. That would have been highest and best use. I know I could have turned it around right then and sold it for a profit if I'd wanted to. I decided not to do that. I'm spending a little more money because it's fun to me, and this is the kind of thing you do with your money, and doing something experimental. Whether I'll regret that or not, I don't know. It might be something that I do regret if we have to turn it around and flip it right away. It probably won't bring in what I paid to build it. I don't know that for sure. I lucked out in location. I really did. It's in probably the most prime spot it could be, but still, it's still a big risk in that regard. And a lot of clients I get as well, they do build their houses for potential turnaround. They may not need
Right.
5 bedrooms, but they build a 5-bedroom house because that is what is going in that neighborhood. I don't begrudge that at all. I understand and especially if you're younger and you don't plan to make it a place you'd keep for the rest of your life, and flipping it is a factor in there, makes perfect sense. So that is one that's remaining to be seen. The other things about the design, again, it's an unknown until I move in. Is like you said, this could be something. I do have these fears that I designed this thing that I love the concept and it looks like it's coming out, but what if I really hate it? Hate being in this thing, because it's like you said, I haven't seen a house like it before, other than Pompeii. I've toured Pompeii and I've seen houses like
Right.
that there, but I've never lived in one, so it'll be interesting to see.
Well, I mean, my first thought about those comments, you talking about maybe, not being able to flip it for a profit right away or for a while. At the end of the day, it's your home, and not everything that makes you happy in life is certainly about money. So
Yep.
I could see if it was my own, for a client, you have to do a little bit more due diligence and make sure that you're meeting their needs or whatever. But when you're doing your own, if you want to spend a little bit extra to have this cool, unique thing that you may absolutely love, I don't know. I think from the drawings, it looks outstanding. I was just trying to figure out this whole, what do you mean no windows thing? But now that you've described these courtyards inside in the light, I kind of love the idea. So you're going to have to come back again when it's all
Yeah.
done and talk
Yeah, I
to
have to
me
have some
about
people
how
stay there and give their opinions on it too. It's a yeah, it is a risk, and you have a set amount of money. If you don't have unlimited funds, you're like, I could be spending it on this, or I could be taking 4 vacations to X or something like that. So, which is going to make your life better in some way? And it's often a really hard choice. So, yeah.
Yeah, but life's kind of boring if there's not a little risk in there once in a while
True.
to do something that
Absolutely true.
might be something incredible. So I usually close out the episode with a couple of extra questions, one of which we ask everybody. But since we're talking about residential today, I like to talk about a couple a little bit broader into industry kinds of things. What do
Okay.
you think we as a profession in general could be doing better when we're designing our homes in our neighborhoods? Where do you think we're falling down, or how do you think we can improve?
Yeah, I think there seems to be a frozen nature to a lot of thought now about zoning, and a lot is on autopilot. It seems Austin has some progressive zoning. They had the McMansion ordinance here, which was great. It was intended to stop. You have a neighborhood of cute small houses, and you have suddenly a gigantic McMansion built in the middle of it. So they came up with some zoning laws in order to prevent that. But those were really geared around a very specific outcome: a peaked roof, gable roof house, because you get huge bonuses for gable roofs, for dormers, for a lot of other things. And it sort of is generating the same look over and over again. And so you get the zoning that comes in with good intentions, but doesn't produce what you expected. But it's very difficult now, it seems to be, politically and other ways, to rethink that. And it really gets bogged down in a lot of things. So it's sort of, can we do more experimentation in some ways to try different organizations of residences or ways to live? The one I brought up before too, of mixing uses. I think people are always looking at the malls and what to do with a mall. Well, if you combine some uses in those malls, it could be they could be amazing and brought back. I'll predict this one thing: if there's some building form that's really out now and will make a comeback, I'll pick the mall, because I do think there are some. It's really out now. I've been to a few lately, and it's pretty depressing. But there could be a great mix of uses in these things, because if I keep talking to people about, like, what if you added a senior independent living facility on top of this mall, and then you combined it with like a daycare center, so people who have time on their hands could come down and help with the children, and also have a communal space to go to and everything. So combining all these uses together would be really amazing. And I think zoning just hasn't gotten there, or there's not enough political pressure to make it happen yet. I would just say that I think the idea of doing experimental projects along with your practice, if this is for architects listening, if you have the chance to do that, it's really worth doing. I think it adds so much to your projects, the projects you do build, when you do, come up with the craziest thing you can think of, and just build a model of it or do something to get that out of you, and then you can use it, parts of it in projects you do. So architecture can kind of be a hobby and a career at the same time, and yet you still get sort of different aspects of satisfaction in both of those parts.
I love that answer, because as you were talking about that, I was thinking about how we're trying to make our cities more walkable. It's been a number of years now, 7 or 8 years ago, that I went to Paris, and you could walk everywhere. And
Hmm.
from the little apartment I rented, there was a little grocery store right across the street. I'm right in the middle of the city, and a wine shop across the street, and a meat market. And there was a bakery over here and a Starbucks. And I mean, there was like within a couple blocks, everything I could possibly need. And if we want our cities to be more walkable and we want to start using less cars and being more sustainable in the way that we live, I think we're going to have to start mixing uses, and our city governments are going to have to become more flexible in order to promote that innovation and
Yeah, I think
kind of
it's
thinking outside the box.
it's a value to live in a city, even for a brief period of time, even if you may not love it. I mean, I lived in New York 20 years or so, and it was just I didn't have a car, and you're used to it. You just walk everywhere you need to go, and you know. I guess one of the downsides is the neighborhood I lived in, everything was within 2 blocks. So you you actually never left that 2 block radius except for
Yeah.
special events. I remember you reading the New Yorker to see what's going on in New York while you're sitting in your apartment because you just didn't leave your little enclave there. But it's a super valuable experience, and it teaches you that before that I'd grown up in Florida where it was unimaginable to not have a car. You just couldn't do anything if you didn't have a car. So to get that experience and then live with it and get to know what it's like, you do see some other possibilities.
Yeah, you pretty much can't get by in Portland without having a car unless you actually live downtown. The urban sprawl here is crazy. But my youngest son lives in Boston. They have
Hmm.
excellent public transportation. He's moved to Boston 2 weeks after graduating from college, and he hasn't had a car since he's been there. I'd say a
Yeah.
couple times a year he goes to rent a car for some, doing a little road trip or whatever with his girlfriend, and he gets by just fine. Well, and now, like you said, you can put a drone pad on your house because they're
Right.
delivering everything. I love that. So
You
one
get some
question
odd opinions from people about urban living. It's always like the questions we got after moving to Austin were like, "Oh, you have a little kid. Isn't it great to have yards and everything?" I was like, "Well, we were 2 blocks from Riverside Park. It was the same. It was not that big a difference in terms of outdoor space and things like that. So it's very different than a lot of people imagine it might be to live in a city. Yeah.
Yeah, I have never actually lived in the city, and I appreciated having a house and a big yard while I was raising my kids. Now I have a 3-story townhome. I have no yard at all. I have some flower beds outside my front door in a forest for a backyard, and I love it, but I can't walk anywhere. Besides
Right.
this little tiny little mini village at the bottom of the hill, I have to drive everywhere I go. And I think if they were more flexible with zoning, it would just automatically promote more mixed use in neighborhoods, no matter where they are. People get a
Yeah.
little sticky about their neighborhood. They don't want a store in their neighborhood or whatever. I
Right.
think some of us as people need to get over that as well. So before I get to my final question that everybody gets, a question I didn't warn you about. So what's going on now at besides your house? What's your firm? What's Scott Specht Architects up to, and what can we expect to see coming down the pipe from you?
We have a lot of work right now, and so we're doing. It's funny how the market changes. We've done institutional work. There are phases where the economy is supporting institutional work more. We did a lot of office, commercial work for a while. Right now, it seems to be supporting all residential, and so that's where we are, and we're kind of focusing on residential. We seem to be thriving in that market. So we're doing a lot of really interesting houses that do have a lot of experimental qualities to them as well. So you'll see that coming down the pike very shortly. And the other thing is we started as Specht Hartman. My partner Louise Hartman. We had the firm going in New York and Austin for a very long time. In 2015, I took that over. It's with Specht Architects, and now just this year, it's going to be Specht Novak Architects. So I have 2 partners now, and so it's becoming a bigger concern, I guess, or at least it's nice having partners and having people have a stake in in the success of the company other than just me. And I really like that. So yeah, it's exciting, changing.
Well, I'm excited to see because now I know where to find you. So I'll be keeping an eye out. When I see something interesting pop up, I'm going to be calling you and saying, "Hey,
Oh,
Scott, we need
great.
to talk again."
Okay.
Final question.
Sure.
Everybody gets this question. Everybody on the planet gets this question that talks to me. As individuals, we all hope that our presence or actions in this life will result in some kind of impact on the world around us or something that makes the world a better place. Those can be little things, those can be big things. For me personally, I call that my world domination statement. When I have something in my head that I want to do to make a difference for somebody or in some arena, that's part of my world domination statement. So, personal or professional, how do you as an individual hope to impact this world that we live in? What is your world domination statement?
Well,
Big
it ties
question.
in perfect. Yeah, big question, and I have an answer that goes to a larger scale than it might, which is it's the next in line of these experimental projects I'm doing, which goes in scale to something massive, and not only involving architecture, but and not primarily involving architecture. Actually, it's more political, and it involves a lot of what we talked about in terms of zoning and things like that. Is that I've become fascinated with this idea of these structures that exist that are quasi-governmental structures, but they're not governmental. They're private. The easiest one to understand, I guess, is like an HOA, where
Okay.
you have a government that's in the running in the background, but then you've layered onto that another government, which is private, has come up with its own rules that it enforces, and the purpose of those rules is theoretically at least to make everyone feel more comfortable in that neighborhood by restricting certain things you can do. It gives you a look to a house that you have to follow with. And we run into this as architects all the time. You have to use, masonry on the exterior. You have to have a pitch of a roof, something like that. And you pay for that privilege too. You pay an HOA fee every month. Well, there are a lot of things like that go on, but they're usually separate entities, like healthcare. You pay for your health insurance and you get that health insurance. Sometimes your company pays for it. Sometimes you pay for it personally if you don't have a company that does that. Private security or home security systems. What if you could take all these things and integrate them into one system or one company, let's say, that built a city and really defined the nature of what that city could be for the positive, a very optimistic based city that uses those kind of rules in a way that is for the benefit of everyone. It's something that actually has been talked about by, of all people, Walt Disney. I know the battle that he got into that's going on with, Ron DeSantis and the Disney Corporation is partially due to that. Is in the 1960s when he bought that property in Florida, he would not purchase it unless he got some special treatment from the state of Florida, which is, a lot of places have taken that on now, other types of corporations and living systems. But anyway, he had the right to build airport, to build nuclear power plant, to maintain his own roads, to do all of this kind of thing, to create his own government. And the purpose was Epcot wasn't supposed to be another theme park. It was supposed to be an actual functioning city. Now that city was based around, big corporations having a, presence there and putting into the city and, kind of making it futuristic in certain ways with transportation systems and a lot of other things. But what if you could take that idea and do an experimental city that would have, some aspects of that where you could have control a little bit more over the broader sense of government. I'm interested to see where that goes. I mean, it's just started, and it's maybe a book project to start with, and then maybe actually an actual proposal for trying something. But I like the idea, like in the 19th century in the U.S., it was a place of fervid experimentation socially. There were communities even earlier, like the Shakers and Quakers, the Amanas, the forgotten ones like the Gillette, King Gillette, who started the shaving company. It was actually a utopian community to start with. A lot of these were kind of shady, but based on other things like free love and, other ideals. But I think you could take some of those ideas and do them for what you consider the good, and let's see what we come up with. I'd love, to have a proliferation of those kind of experimental ideas, especially given as incoherent as things are in the world right now. So that's my big project. It's a little bit ill-defined yet, but hopefully it'll be more defined in the near future.
That's interesting. I was exposed to, and I'm not going to remember the name of it for the life of me, but there's this city. This is probably 7 or 8 years ago that we had a speaker come speak to our Portland CSI chapter about this city in the Middle East.
Oh, Masdar?
That's it. Exactly. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure that's not the concept you're thinking about, because like everything they do is controlled in that city. They decide when your blinds are going up and going down.
Exactly.
And, those kinds of things.
That's what you have to avoid in that kind of thing. You don't want to make it a walled bubble for wealthy people, and you don't want to make it, something that is, exclusionary. So it's a very hard line to pick. But Masdar has not been a great success from what I've read. So it's
I haven't. I hadn't even thought about it in a number of years until you were talking about creating the city. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I was also sitting here thinking, I wonder whatever happened with that, because I don't think I've heard about it since then. And I know they were dumping incredibly huge amounts of money. And you couldn't live in the city unless you worked at that university that was there. And I mean, I just remember some things that I'm like, I get what you're talking about, but that would be something that you would have to be really careful that you didn't cross into this almost communist society.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it can get stultifying, because, you have a lot of good architects worked on that project. But when things, even if they're great designs, when it's all the same and has the same kind of character and feel, and the rules are tight, and what you can do and what you can't do, it starts to get really oppressive. And so it's, how do you do this without being oppressive, and do it for positive, in a real positive way? That it's a tough call. So
you'll let me know when you figure this out, right?
Okay. Yes.
Well, when you get it all fleshed out, we want to hear more about it.
Yeah. On the lighter side, there's one other project that if I have a minute to talk about, that I've been interested in, is I've always been interested in. I think the reason I got into architecture to start with was I loved building models. And when I was a kid, I built models. I used to make Super 8 movies with, special effects that involved models. I used to do all this kind of stuff. And you see them at museums. You see shows. There was a MoMA show recently with, an artist from Africa who did did models made out of sort of scrap material of utopian buildings, which I thought was fascinating. There's never been a proper museum of miniatures and dioramas and things like that. And I thought that would be a really interesting thing. It'd be perfect for Austin too. So I want to do something called the Diorama-rama, and it could start as a small private museum and see where it goes from there. Because I know I do follow people on Instagram and so forth that do this as a hobby, build, wildly imaginative models of things. And there are certainly a lot of architectural models that are out there that just get forgotten. So it'd be interesting to collect those up and put them on display for people.
That would be a great addition to Austin. I've only been to Austin once. Had a great time when I was there, but that would be a great. Austin shares the same city theme that Portland does. Keep Portland weird.
Right.
Because I think, just so you know, I think Austin stole it from us. It started here.
I think so too.
You guys absconded with it, but I'm okay with that. We can share.
It's become much less weird, but the weirdness is kind of draining out of it.
You could help.
Yeah.
Make this museum happen, and you can just
slip
some weird right back in.
Well, if any of your listeners out there want to finance this, please give me a call.
I'm going to laugh when you say, Cherise, somebody called me. Scott, thank you so much for joining me today on Detailed. This was too much fun. It was a great conversation.
Thank you. Yes, it was fun.
I would love to have a little follow-up and get some pictures when it's all done and add them to our landing page for this episode so they can see the finished project, and maybe kind of tell us how the rest of it went.
Yeah, we'll take videos of us living in misery in this walled compound. So,
No,
you can post those.
Power positive thinking. But if I'm ever in Austin, I want to see it. I want to see it. If I'm in Austin, I'm calling you up and saying, "Can I come invade your house for 10 minutes and
the invite
check it
is
out?"
open.
Okay, great.
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.